message in the series about finding our Lord, in which we started with the verse that Tina shared with us for the children's portion, about us having the right to become the sons of God, and how that implies a royal decree, the governmental authority is given for us to claim that position of royalty, sons of God, daughters of God. And the realization that children of royalty are brought up to assume positions of authority. They're brought up into that. You can just sense it when they walk into a room. They've been trained. They've been brought up in that expectancy of authority. And we can see this in the scriptures. Proverbs 28 says the righteous, that's us, are to be as bold as lions. God expects us to take our place in the kingdom and to use the authority He's given us. When I was 10 years old, my parents took me to a zoo. I think it was down in the Bronx, but I'm not sure. But there was a display that had lions. And there was a handrail in the front, and then about 3 feet in front of that, there was this big plexiglass wall. The plexiglass wall didn't look very strong. But there were these lions, and they were mostly laying around in the sunshine down there, but there was one young male that was right up near the edge of the wall. And I was kind of fascinated by this, and I'm standing there as close to that plexiglass wall as I could get, just wanted to check this lion out. And there was these little girls that were skipping down the sidewalk behind me. You ever see the MGM movies that start with a lion and it roars?
Yeah.
Well, it was a roar even shorter than that, but when it roared, there was something subsonic to this. When he roared, you could feel the vibration in your chest. And these little girls just came completely undone. And ran instead of skipped. But you could feel that. The roar is significant. And we wrestle not against flesh and blood, so this roar, this authority that I'm talking about, is against the spiritual forces. Right? It's our authority to stand and proclaim God's kingdom, what He's already done. Today we're looking at Joshua. And as in the other two, Samuel and Moses, we saw the three aspects of this authority. One is our attitude, which is comprised of two things. Attitude is both wanting to get so close, you can't get close enough, you can't have enough. You want to be right there with God all the time. We saw that with Samuel, we saw that with Moses, and today we're going to see it in Joshua's life as well. The other half of attitude is, it's really faith. We call it seeing. We have to have the ability to see what is not. Now, seeing what is not could be called dreaming or imagining, but seeing what is not and believing that God has already accomplished it, that's faith. It's not just seeing what is not, but seeing what is not and believing that it has already been accomplished. That enables our roar. And the last one is, not the last one, servanthood is the second one. All three of these people you'll see are servants for the Lord. They do what the Lord says, and they're also surrendered. They do what the Lord says, and they do how He says to do it. That's surrender. That's our yes. Not just I'll do what You tell me to do, God, but I'm going to do it your way. I'm surrendered to doing exactly what You say. So we're in Joshua chapter 5. I'm going to start at verse 13. And I'm going to read through chapter 6, verse 5. Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are you for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, No. Rather, indeed, I come now as captain of the host of the Lord. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth. And he bowed down, and he said to him, What has my Lord to say to his servant? I'll do it your way, Lord. Captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Do it the way You say. Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out, and no one came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hand. With its king and its valiant warriors, you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once. You shall do this for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and they'll stand before the ark. And then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow the trumpets, and it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people will shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people will go up, every man straight ahead. Lord, bless the word. Open our hearts and minds, Father. Let us assume our authority in your name. Let me tell you a little bit about Joshua. As we're kind of starting this, he's ready to walk into his destiny. Right? He knows his identity. Destiny follows identity. He's about to proclaim for God what God wants to be done. But unlike the other 2 leaders that we looked at, Samuel and Moses, Joshua has a lifetime of stuff behind him. Samuel was plugged into the temple at a young age, but it was a perverse setting. The priests were doing things that were not right. Moses lived in a house of privilege, but it was not a house that knew the Lord, right? An Egyptian household. Joshua has come out of the promised land. He's one of the Israelites that came out, probably around 40 years old. And he's been in the wilderness for 40 years, so he has 40 years of knowing God in his life. And we're going to see that. In fact, I'm going to pull out some text here just to show you what Joshua has accomplished, what he has gone through. In Exodus 17, it says, Moses chose Joshua to lead the men of Israel into battle against the Amalekites at Rephidim. The Amalekites were sniping the Israelites as they were going from place to place. They'd pick off little groups of them, and they'd come from behind, and they'd attack, and then they'd run. And Moses said, okay, we're going to get some people together. Joshua, I want you to lead them. I want you to go out, and I want you to kick their butts. He didn't say that. But that was the idea. We're going to settle this once and for all. And so Joshua goes out. You probably all heard this story about Moses lifting up his hands during the battle. And when he lifted up his hands, the Amalekites were being defeated. And when his hands got tired, he dropped them down. The Israelites were getting defeated. So he lifted his hands back up, and the Amalekites were getting defeated. Finally, his brother Aaron and another priest named Hur went up on the hill, and they held up Moses' hands. And they kept them up. And it says Joshua was completely victorious over the Amalekites. He wiped them out. It wasn't all the Amalekites, because there was thousands. This was a major tribe. Amalek, just so you know, was the grandson of Esau, the twin brother of Jacob, who sold his birthright. This comes back around. But Joshua was victorious in that battle. He had to be a fairly young man. Couldn't have been much more than 40 years old. Completely victorious. And God tells Moses, write this story down and recite it to Joshua. Not so that Joshua would be proud of what he had done, but recite it to him because it's going to be a reminder to him that these people need to be wiped out. They're going to run into them again in the promised land. And this is not the end. But remember this day, because there's more to come. So Joshua was called out. God told Moses, Joshua is going to have a part in this later. Exodus 24, Moses is going up on the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments. It says it took Aaron and 70 elders and Joshua up the mountain with him. They stopped about halfway, they worshiped, and actually it says they saw God. They saw God standing there on a spear of sapphire. Aaron, Moses, Joshua, and 70 elders. They saw him, right? And then it says Joshua went with Moses the rest of the way up, and the rest were dismissed. He told them to stay behind. But Joshua was privileged. He was the servant of Moses. He was privileged to go up the rest of the way to the mountain. He was very close to Moses. Moses was his mentor as well as his leader. In Exodus 33, it talks about how Moses would go into the tent and talk with God. God would talk with him face to face, like a man talks with his friend. And he would get that shiny, glowy face. And at the end of the session, he would put on a veil, cover himself, and go back to the camp. But the word says, Joshua departed not from the tent. He didn't want it. There's that attitude. Can't get close enough. Can't get enough. Moses is going back. He's staying there. He's staying where the blessing was. Right? This is what... Numbers 14, Joshua says he was selected as one of 10 spies to go into Canaan. Moses sends 10 spies and check out the promised land. And most of them came back, 8 of them came back with negative reports. Well, it was sort of a positive report. It's beautiful, but the people are huge. We can't possibly overtake them. It's big cities. There's no way. Joshua and Caleb came back with a positive report saying, hey, this is the God that parted the sea. This is the God that's been providing for us all. This is the God that struck down the Amalekites in front of us. You know, we don't have anything to worry about. Let's go. That's good. You know, when Joshua gave that good report, and the other 8, Joshua and Caleb gave a good report, the other 8 gave a negative report. It says the people said, oh, we need to elect a new leader to take us back to Egypt. We need to get another person who will take us back to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb says, with their garments, Aaron and Moses fell on the ground, prostrate, praying to God. The people picked up stones. They wanted to stone them. They wanted to kill them and go back to Egypt. God intervened. And that whole generation died in the wilderness. That cost them another 40 years before they went into the promised land. Deuteronomy 31 is where we see Joshua, Moses dies, and Joshua's commissioned as leader of all Israel. He's in charge of the whole shebang. He's commissioned. He's appointed. He's anointed. Right? Joshua chapter 1 verse 3, there's another touch on that. It says God promises to give him every place he sets the sole of his foot. I've given it to you. That's where Joshua was at the beginning of this passage where we read, where he's looking over Jericho. He's got this promise. He's got all that stuff fulfilled in his past. He knows who he is. Now let me tell you a little bit about Jericho. It was one of the largest cities of the Canaanites. The city itself was not all that large by today's standards. I mean, the city proper was about 10 acres, maybe 11 acres. Not big, but very affluent. It was right on the southern trade route, and so everybody that was going anywhere passed through Jericho. And so because of the wealth they had accumulated, they were well fortified. They had huge walls, and the city was made almost entirely of stone. Huge place. They were influenced because of their position, both by the Babylonian Empire and their gods and the Assyrian Empire and their gods. So there was a lot of negative influence here. And God calls them out. In Deuteronomy, he tells us what their sin is. He calls Jericho an abomination to the Lord. He said, he wasn't speaking specifically of Jericho. He was talking about the cities in the Promised Land. But he says, they do human sacrifice. They sacrifice their children to Molech. Right? They're involved in witchcraft. They're involved in spiritism. They're involved in necromancy. They're involved in all this terrible stuff. The worst of it, though, was the knock against. I see this as a pattern in the scriptures and through the scriptures today. By sacrificing the children seems to never end. Seems like that's a favorite attack by Satan. They sacrificed to Molech for spiritual favor. The Egyptians were sacrificing the firstborn, not the firstborn, every male child of the Hebrews, right? They were doing that for ethnic purity. The Chinese have long had this policy of abortion and limiting the family growth as an economic survival. You want too many people, can't feed all those children. We just realized this past week when we watched, what's the name of that movie? Unplanned. Anybody seen that? It's about abortion as an institution in America. We realized we're aborting over 1 million babies a year. 1 million babies a year. And the worst thing is they're targeting ethnic groups. They're going into places where Black and Spanish families are predominant. God has mercy on this nation. God targeted them because of this. You know, and it wasn't just like, okay, the children of Israel were going into the Promised Land, they're going to drive all these people out. It goes back a lot farther than that. In Genesis 15, Abraham was told by God, follow me to the land that I'm going to give you. And after a while, he's pasturing his flocks in the promised land, but he doesn't own very much of it. He's asking God, is this really what are you going to really give me this? And so God answers him by giving him a dream. He puts him in a deep sleep, and he gives him a dream. The dream is prophetic. In the dream, Abraham sees his descendants being carried away into captivity for 400 years. And then he sees them being delivered. And then he sees them assuming the promised land. And then God speaks to him in the dream, and he says to God, how come it's taking so long, and why all this stuff? And God says, it's going to be several generations before you go in, because the sin of this people is not quite complete. The iniquity is not quite complete. There's a timing and a purpose to everything God does. These inhabitants of the promised land have been in God's crosshairs for a while. And yet, He's not without compassion for those who would have turned from Him and repent. He also says in Deuteronomy, he tells the Israelites, he wants to make very sure of this. Don't be thinking that you're going into the promised land because of your righteousness, but it's because of the wickedness of these nations that I drive them out before you. Right? Their time has come. There is judgment at hand. There was judgment at Sodom and Gomorrah. Noah was pulled out of that. Lot's family was pulled out of Sodom and Gomorrah. Noah was saved from the flood. Rahab is saved from the Canaanite city of Jericho. Whoever repents, God will pull out. He's not just indiscriminately wiping people out, but their sin is cause for consequence. It's cause for judgment. A million babies a year. I just can't get that out of my thoughts. There will be consequence, even if it's not against the law. It's against God's law. And there will be consequence and judgment for that. In Joshua 2, Rahab tells the two people that Joshua sent in to spy out the city. She says, everybody is afraid of you. We've seen you coming for months across the wilderness. We've seen the fight against the Amalekites and these other kings. And we know that God is for you. Funny. They all knew that. And nobody's repented, except for Rahab. So, in this text, Joshua is out observing. He's observing Jericho. He's observing his objective, his military objective. Now, Jericho is this huge city, big walls. His strategic options are pretty limited. They don't have sieging towers. They don't have catapults. The city's locked up. Nobody's going in or coming out, so he can't even infiltrate it with somebody that can start something from inside. His best option militarily would be to create a barricade around the city, starve them out. Of course, they've known he's coming for months, so they're probably well stocked. It would take a while. And the problem with that is the fact that Jericho, being on this prominent trade route, is well known to these other kings in the area. They would certainly see what's going on, create an alliance, and come against Israel. And so even that isn't going to work right. And Joshua's up there trying to figure this out. He's standing there, and he looks up, and he sees somebody who is challenging his authority. He sees somebody standing in the way with a sword drawn. And just like in today's military or police force or anything, they don't pull your weapon out of your holster unless you plan to use it. So here's this individual challenging his authority, standing there with his sword drawn right in the road, right before him. Joshua knows who he is. He's been commissioned, he's been appointed, he's been anointed, he's got his identity down pat, and he's proceeding towards his destiny, and here's somebody standing in the way with a sword drawn. What he really wants to know is, who are you? Right? Isn't that what Moses asked him? He asked God, who am I? But then he asked him, who are you? Joshua knows who he is. He doesn't know who this is. Are you for me? Or are you against me? Are you on my side or are you on their side? And the answer comes back, neither. Neither. I'm here as captain of the host of the Lord. And that word in Hebrew is Saba Yahweh. Saba Yahweh. I'm here as captain of Saba Yahweh. The word Saba means not just host. It means like an array of an army that's beyond numbering, like the stars in the sky or the sands on the seashore. This is God speaking, and he recognizes that right away. He falls on his face and says, what do you want me to do? Are you on my side or are you on their side? It doesn't apply anymore, because he knows this is God. And he's not coming to take sides, he's coming to take command. He's coming to take command. And you'll notice that God gives him a battle plan. Saba Yahweh is going to fight this battle. The battle is going to be the Lord's, Joshua. And this is what I want you to do. And this is how I want you to do it. And you know what? We can look at this battle plan. It's kind of intricate in a way. It doesn't make a lot of strategic sense. It almost is like a barricade, but not quite. And then at the end, it's miraculous. It's going to take seeing this with the knowledge that it's already accomplished for him to have the attitude that will succeed in this. But we can look at all this stuff in there. I mean, there's the number of 7, prophetically, the number of 7 means completeness or fullness. And we often get that from the creation. In 7 days, in 6 days he created, and in the 7th day he rested. So in the 7-day period, we have the fullness of creation. If you turn over to Revelation, we see a whole different kind of 7. Right? There's 7 churches that are being addressed. There's 7 angels that blow 7 trumpets and 7 bowls of wrath. And judgment is coming. Right? Judgment and holiness. And in this battle plan, you've got 7 priests and 7 ram's horns and 7 days, and 7 times on the 7th day, judgment is coming. Because God's had this in his view for a long time. He's been waiting until the time was complete. Until it's not like God draws a line, but he knows when we have drawn our own line. He knows when our time is complete, because there's no more chance for us. We have crossed that line. So the bottom line is this. The battle is God's. The battle is the Lord's. We can have a roar, because when we do things God's way, the battle is his, and the victory is already won. And that's where we get the impetus for our roar. He's already won the battle that we face. Now, as to the attributes of the leadership we're talking about, attitude, servanthood, and surrender, I want to point out that the first thing that God tells him, well, we've already seen in Joshua's life, he couldn't get close enough. When Moses left the temple, the tabernacle, he stayed there. He couldn't be too far away. He wanted that closeness with the Lord. But now we're going to see the other side of attitude. And that is the side that you can see beyond what is right in front of you. Right? God said to him, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand." See, I have given Jericho into your hand. He has to see that the battle is the Lord's. He has to see that it's already accomplished in order for him to believe this. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be able to see what isn't. Not as in dreaming or imagining. We need to be able to see what isn't as if it's already accomplished, because it is already accomplished by the Lord. It's already completed in his purview. So to find our roar, we have to see what God is doing. We have to believe that he's already done it. And then we have to stand on that in faith and be able to proclaim with authority the establishment of God's kingdom. Every place we put the sole of our foot, every place we put the sole of our foot, we have that authority. If we can see what God is doing, we believe that he's already done it and accomplished it, we proclaim it and bring it to pass. Every place we put the sole of our foot. And now we look at servanthood. God tells Moses, "See, your hands. Now when we looked at Moses, God asked Moses, what is that in your hand? You gotta have something in your hand. You gotta have something in your hand. And we learned that when Moses released that, he could see what God would do with what was in his hand. And God takes what Moses had, it's a stick. And in the end, he tells him, lift it up, stretch it out, point it at what you're going through, and proclaim what already has been accomplished. And we all have a stick. God has given each of us a stick. It might be our will, or our intellect, or our abilities, or talents. We got a stick. And when we surrender it, we release it, and let's see what God can do with it. And then when we lift it up and we stretch it out, we point it at whatever is our object, those things that have come against us, those challenges, you can see what God will do and accomplish and believe in what he has already accomplished. But this is more. God is saying to Joshua, I'm going to put something else in your hand. When I was about 10 years old, I did a lot of stuff when I was 10. I was on a Little League team, and right here in Keysville, and all the teams were named after Major League teams. And ours was the Yankees, and so at some point in mid-season, we went down to New York City, we went to Yankee Stadium, we got to watch a game, and it was great. They ate a lot of hot dogs and peanuts and that's it. But our coach, well, he was down there, he bought this little pocket knife, like a Swiss Army knife, had a lot of blades and stuff on it, but it said Yankees on the side. And he announced on the bus on the way back that at the end of the season, whoever was the hardest player and the best helper and blah, 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 he would give them that knife. I wanted that knife. I really wanted it. I mean, I determined that I was going to be the hardest player and the best helper and, all that stuff. And I did all season long. I played my heart out. And every game, I would come early and I'd leave late, and I'd always help pick up and I'd always help spread out the equipment and stuff. And on the last day of and he knew. He knew it. And there were like 15 of us and only one knife. So he had his truck there. We were supposed to be picking up the balls and the bats and the gloves and putting the stuff in. And I was like the only one doing it. But I had my hands full of all this stuff. Balls and bats and gloves. And just as I get to the tailgate, he stands right in front of me. He didn't want it. He knew I wanted that knife. And he says, I only have one, and there's 15 of you, so the first one that picks it up gets it, and he puts it down. Right in front of me. By the time I could drop all that stuff, somebody else already grabbed it. My hands were too full of stuff to get what was being actually given to me. Good thing Joshua's hands weren't full of stuff. Oh, Pastor Rick, what kind of stuff could he have? What kind of stuff could he be hanging on to? You know what? He went up to the top of the mountain with Moses. The others were sent away. Right? He was chosen to fight the battle against the Amalekites. He was anointed. He was appointed. He was commissioned as the leader. Well, he could have been hanging on to a lot of pride. That might have kept him from grabbing what God was putting in his hands. When he came back with that report as a spy, he wanted to stone him. They cost him an extra 40 years of bumbling around in the wilderness. He could have been completely unforgiven. He could have been hanging on to that. He could have had unforgiveness in his hands, and it would have kept him from receiving what God wants to put in our hands. What else? What else can we have in our hands that will keep us from receiving what God wants us to have? It keeps us from having the roar. It could have been his knowledge. I know all this stuff. I know, the circle in the city stuff. Let's just go down and shoot arrows over the wall. Let's do it another way. His knowledge could have been in his hands. We need to make sure our hands are free if we want to receive what God has for us. And then there's surrender. And we've already pointed out that when he found out that this was actually the Lord standing before him, he fell on his face. But the task he was given at that point was, take off your shoes. What is that anyway? I mean, the same thing happened to Moses when he got in God's presence. God told him, take off your shoes, this is holy ground. What does that mean? This is not a rhetorical question. If you've got some ideas about that, no. What does it mean for we come into church on Sunday night that anybody has to do it? We do. We take off our shoes because of those two passages.
Why do people wear shoes?
Protect your feet.
Why do you protect your feet on holy ground?
So there's submission and there's humility. Also maybe purity. A lot of people take their shoes off when they go in a house because they don't want to track in the dirt from the world. I don't want to do that.
I always see it as
Way of getting closer in intimacy. Do that as well. All these things. This is not going to gain any of those anymore. Or just march on with this. All those are good. It's humility. It's intimacy. It's purity. In the presence of God. But no, I think it's also a test. I think it was a little bit of a test. Because if you are willing to do something as simple as take off your shoes, you're certainly not going to be marching around the city 7 times, blowing the horn, doing all those other things. Take off your shoes. It gives us a little test. So what does that have to do with surrender? You know, from time to time we have conversations with people and they express to us their desire for more. And that's not wrong. We want to be closer to God. We want to see things. We want to experience Him more. But the way it comes out, it sounds like, one person says, I want to see people raised from the dead. Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Another person said, I'm looking for big things. I'm looking for real fruit. I had a conversation with somebody just recently who was one of those people that had expressed this before. And what came out was, I finally realized, and she's been gone for quite a while. So it wasn't us that brought her to the realization of this, although we would have rejoiced at the opportunity to. She says, what I realized? She says, in all the things that have transpired in my life, the little things are the big things. The little things are the big things. And in thinking about it, we rejoiced at hearing that. Yes, she's got this, but there's like one more step. She's on the threshold and there's one more step. If you realize that the little things are the big things, the next thing to realize is that they're all big things. Everything we have been given to do is a big thing. Yeah. I'm just one of 7 priests that, they don't really need me and we're going to go around the thing 7 times. What difference does it make if I sit out for one day? Right? They're all big things. It's all part of the plan that we have. Whatever God gives you to do. The surrender, the part that says, I'll do it your way, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem to us, it's not. It's a big thing. That brings a roar. When you realize that even what you think is the most insignificant piece of God's plan is a critical thing. It's yours to do. Or not. But if you want the roar, it's a yes. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it just the way you told me. Little things are big things. Everything is a big thing. Let's stand together, of course, in prayer. Father, thank you for this day and for blessing us with your presence this morning. Father, I pray that we would see you in our path, sword drawn as the captain of Sadayale. We have a place behind you. Father, I pray that you'd help us to see what you have has already accomplished in our lives, and to stand on that with authority, with the ability to roar into the spiritual realm and proclaim what you have on to any of the things of the world, that we'd have our hands free. That nothing would hold us back. Not unforgiveness, not pride, not knowledge, not anything, Father, between us. Not the purity of it, the humility of it, the intimacy. Let there be yes. And let us recognize that all the things that you give us are big things. In Jesus' name.